What's going on, guys? It's Combat Muffin again. I'm here bringing you another comparing and contrast video, this time comparing and contrasting the impact grenade and the thermal detonator. Now before we start this video, I must tell you that I'm not going to be definitively telling you which star card is better and which star card you should definitely use. I'm merely giving you the information you need to know to make the decision on your own, because the star card that you're going to use always depends on what kind of player you are and what kind of playing style suits yourself. I'm here to give you the facts and a little bit of my opinion, but the final decision is always up to you. Now let's delve right into this two star cards that we're going to be discussing today, the first being the thermal detonator. The description reads, the most popular and widely used grenade in the galaxy. It is easy to use and has deadly results. And the second star card is the impact grenade. The description reads, having a smaller blast radius than the thermal detonator, the impact grenade explodes directly on contact with any object. Now right off the bat, through reading the description, one would assume that the impact grenade is far less better than the thermal detonator, just due to the blast radius. But we're going to go more deep down into the facts with the pros and cons of each, comparing and contrasting the differences. Now let's get started on the pros and cons of our first star card, which is the thermal detonator. Now as we read from the description, it has a larger blast radius than the impact grenade. And for those of you that don't know what blast radius is, I imagine that most of you do, it means that the larger the blast radius, the further away it can have a killing detonation. The smaller the blast radius is, the closer it has to be to kill an enemy in one detonation. Blast radius is a very key component in any grenade and is probably going to go into your deciding factor for which one you're going to use. The next pro for the thermal detonator is that it simply has a faster cooldown than the impact grenade at 15 seconds, while the impact grenade's cooldown is at 20 seconds. Two more small pros for the thermal detonator in comparison to the impact grenade is that not only do you unlock the thermal detonator earlier, but it costs far less than the impact grenade. In fact, the thermal detonator only costs 150 credits, while the impact grenade costs 1,700 credits. That's 1,550 more credits to buy. And our last pro for the thermal detonator is that it can ricochet, while the impact grenade cannot. It is one of the many mechanics of the thermal detonator that the impact grenade doesn't have. I'll go more into that later on. That was a fairly long list of pros, however the thermal detonator does have some cons. The first being that it can't really do long distance kills. When you're doing long distance, you have to have a long flight trajectory, one that goes way up and way down. And one of the mechanics of the thermal detonator is that it has a 3-second detonation. So from the time it leaves your hand, it's going to take 3 seconds to detonate. And oftentimes when you're trying to hit a long distance opponent, it'll detonate it before it arrives at its target, resulting in a waste of a star card and a waste of a grenade. And the final con for the thermal detonator is that it can't kill on a direct hit. So if you hit your opponent in the head with a grenade from throwing it, it's not going to detonate. It probably has 1 or 2 more seconds, so it's going to fall to its feet and your opponent might have time to run away, in comparison to the impact grenade, which will detonate right on impact. In conclusion, the thermal detonator has more concrete pros, such as shorter cooldown and larger blast radius. However, the mechanics of the weapon can have some fallbacks and result in some lost kills. Now let's move over to the impact grenade, starting off with the pros, the first being that the impact grenade, in comparison to the thermal detonator, does far superior job at long distance kills. Now unlike the thermal detonator, which might detonate in the middle of its flight path, the impact grenade will not detonate until it reaches its target. Whether that be 2 feet away, whether that be 200 feet away. It will not detonate until it finds something concrete to hit. This means that you have more control of what you want to kill and when you want to kill it. Whereas the thermal detonator, you have to take into consideration when it will arrive at its target and when you want it to detonate. And unfortunately, the impact grenade only has one more pro in my view, and that is that it can kill on a direct hit. So if you throw your grenade and it hits your opponent straight up, it will kill it 10 times out of 10. 100% of the time, it will always kill that opponent if you hit a direct hit. And even if you hit it at its feet, its blast radius is big enough that it can do that. Now we're going to move over to the cons of the impact grenade. the most obvious being that it has a smaller blast radius than the thermal detonator. Now in the description it said that it has a slightly smaller blast radius. Well, straight up, that's just not true. The impact grenade has so much smaller of a blast radius, it isn't even funny. It has way smaller than the description lets off. In my experience, the impact grenade has only killed a full health opponent when the grenade has landed directly at its feet, or it has directly hit the opponent in the body, head, or legs. In addition, the impact grenade has a 5-second longer cooldown than the thermal detonator. It is unlocked later and costs sufficiently more, 1,550 credits more. And lastly, for the cons of the impact grenade, it cannot bounce, it cannot ricochet like the thermal detonator. One situation where this is a major drawback in comparison to the thermal detonator is when your opponent is down a long corridor. With the thermal detonator, you could throw it down the corridor, it could take a bounce, and then arrive right at your opponent's feet. However, with the impact grenade, that's just not a possibility. By the time you throw it down that corridor, it'll land and detonate before it reaches your opponent, resulting in no kill and a waste of a star card. The situation I just gave you was a situation where the thermal detonator is more useful. However, I'll give you a situation where the impact grenade is more useful. Let's say your opponent is rushing at you. Your thermal detonator will not do the job. By the time you throw it at him, it'll bounce on the ground, have about 2 more seconds till detonation, and your opponent will be still running at you, leaving the detonation zone. However, if you have an impact grenade on you, you could throw it at your opponent, hit it just right so it's either at its feet or it hits your opponent directly, and it will kill him, resulting in no longer a threat. The way I look at it, there are 3 main situations which will dictate which kind of grenade you use. There are short-range situations, mid-range situations, and long-range situations. Now in the short range, I believe that the impact grenade will win every single time, because the thermal detonator has that 3-second detonation time, which can really be a drawback. However, in the mid-range, that 3-second detonation time is just right, and it'll get to your opponent and kill it swiftly, while the impact grenade is a maybe, maybe not. It might work, it might not. It's really inconsistent. And then there's long range, which really, to be frank, neither of them work. Long range is a really hit or miss, really unlikely that you get the kill. But if one of them is going to work, it's going to be the impact grenade, because the 3-second detonation time will not kick in like the thermal detonator, and with the impact grenade, your grenade will actually reach its target, most likely. Now with any decision between 2 star cards, the decision is going to be up to that player and the playing style of that player. And with as any 2 star cards, one could choose one and forget the other, one could choose both to be in their star card hand, and one could choose neither. However, a grenade is a very viable option for any star cards. It is always consistent whether you use the thermal detonator or impact grenade. Using both the thermal detonator and the impact grenade is not that bad of an idea. You can use the impact grenade for more close quarters combat and the thermal detonator for more mid-range. However, if you choose to do this, you sacrifice the ability to have a jump pack, which I personally believe is the most viable and the most relevant choice for any star card hand. Now that I've given you all the facts, I'm going to give you a bit of my opinion. My opinion is that the thermal detonator provides a little bit more consistency than the impact grenade. This is not to say that the impact grenade should never be used and that the thermal detonator should always be used. The impact grenade definitely has its time and place, but the thermal detonator just seems to deliver more kills more consistently and more reliably, while the impact grenade is an on-off weapon and depends how good and skilled you are with it. The only reason I say this is because I feel that the impact grenade's blast radius just seems too small compared to that of the thermal detonator. The thermal detonator's blast radius allows you to kill opponents from further out, while the damage fall off of the impact grenade's blast radius results in you having to be extremely accurate in your grenade throws. I feel that the impact grenade deserves a buff in either the blast radius section or the cooldown section. It doesn't really make sense to me that a grenade that has a bigger blast radius would have a smaller cooldown time to a grenade that has a smaller blast radius. And that just about sums it up for the comparing and contrasting of the thermal detonator and impact grenade. I do hope you liked it, and I do hope that I've helped you make your decision about which one you're going to take into Battlefront, whether it be the thermal detonator or the impact grenade. If it was at all helpful, insightful, informative, or any of the above, please feel free to leave a like, subscribe, and comment your thoughts below. I always read it and I always respond, and I really appreciate that. And if you like this comparison video, you can go on the channel and check out our other comparison video about the cycler rifle in comparison to the pulse cannon. That's all for me, and y'all have a good one.